let's take the example of terrorism, for example. I mean, the fear mode in a way in our society is very, hyped, and a lot of people are in a way focusing on that aspect, and they're afraid of it and so forth. This must be a terrible thing to, actually then laying your focus on this, because this is actually something that can strengthen, I guess, let's say, terrorism then. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, if terrorists all got together and understood how to do this and did it all together as a focus. On the other hand, it may well be that we, as the objects of terrorism, can also block that by sending a very positive intention to stop it, or to send an intention for them to disperse.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about, if we, for example, a lot of people are sitting watching television or whatever, the mainstream media pumping out fear, basically, through the tube. That. Oh,
I see.
You see what I mean? Yeah.
Well, my book is really written as an antidote to that, to say that your thoughts are very powerful.
Indeed.
The whole point of the intention experiment is to always select philanthropic targets. So we have been working on simple experiments like a leaf now, and we're going to send simple intention experiments to human beings too in the autumn. But we're also going to be moving on to ecological targets, like we're creating a little mini Gaia, a mini world, like a terrarium, and we're going to artificially raise the temperature and see if we can send an intention to lower it. And that will have profound impact and effect on, or certainly implications for global warming. We're also going to try sending intentions to lower crime rate and see if that has an effect. And that will have a huge implication on lowering crime and violence.
Yeah.
And we're looking at trying to send an intention to purify water, and on and on. And maybe eventually, as we see that, if we understand about this process, we might send an intention to start disbanding terrorists. This is the whole point. It's always going to be philanthropic targets with our experiments on the website. Always inviting the readers. As we're doing it now, there's a very lively forum on that site. And by the way, that's our new site, which is www.theintentionexperiment.com.
Oh, okay.
It's our new site where everybody's coming on and using intention. And the readers are already they're nominating people who need intention sent. And we're going to have a bulletin board soon that has a worthy person to be sent intention every week. And so there have been people already who have. There's one guy called Don Berry who has a bad back. His spine is fused and he can't move it. And he asked our readers, really the readers on their own, decision. They made the decision to send him intentions twice a week, and he's feeling better. He's keeping a diary. So we're just keeping track of all of that and keeping in touch with the readers because of that, to see if we can, create these kinds of little intention experiments in a sense every week.
Oh, fascinating! Yeah. So this is a kind of a very new process and a beginning process, and to be able to outline this. I think this is very important stuff. And also, of course, do you think that influencing things is possible even when you're kind of in an unaware mode, meaning that now we're very in a way, I guess, focused on stuff, and you're very aware and very present in a way when you think about things. But what about unaware influence? Is that possible too?
Well, very much like me and my cleaner. Yes, I think we're sending and receiving at every moment.
Yeah.
I used to think of mental intention as a very, very mental focused attention, but I think we are unintentionally affecting all the time with our thoughts. If you walk around with negative thoughts, and this is the worry, most of us are walking around thinking negative thoughts all the time. If you're thinking negative thoughts, you're having that effect all the time in your life, I think. And the trick is to start turning those negative thoughts into positive, powerful ones, and also learning how to be a good focused intender. Because another thing I did was I interviewed a lot of so-called intention masters, people like Qigong masters and healers and people like that, to see what they all do in common, and found that they all seem to send, to create a mental state of very, very intense focus. And that's when they send intention, and it seems to have a more powerful effect.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned water earlier. Did you when you went about and traveling for your book The Field, did you by any chance get to meet what is it called, Dr. Emoto?
Masaru Emoto. I have met him, yes. I've met him, and I think his stuff is interesting, very interesting and intuitive, and it needs science to prove it. I think that his material is wonderfully interesting, and there's certainly been work that has been done by a Russian called Konstantin Korotkov showing that water, its photonic emissions change with positive emotion. And of course, water is interesting because water makes up most human beings.
Yeah.
It's most of us,
yeah.
and it's most of life is water. And they have found with intention that intention seems to affect the hydrogen-oxygen bonds of water. Very focused intention by a healer or a Qigong master seems to affect the hydrogen-oxygen bonds. So it changes molecular matter. And also water is very interesting because in a sense it's like a laser. It seems to, they've discovered that it has what they call coherent domains. It seems to act like a little recording medium for information about something, which is why perhaps homeopathy works. The water records the signature frequency of some molecule when they're using a particular substance. They dilute it so much that there's only that signature frequency there. There's no substance of the molecule left. And then they use that as medicine. And that may be why it's working, because water is, in a sense, an amplifier.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, because as you said, there seems to be a very special feature to water, and that we are, as you say, a big part of it, and it is us in a way. Fascinating stuff. One thing that I did want to talk about is I began reading in chapter 7 in your new book called The Right Time. I think there was some fascinating info regarding something called the Chamber of Heaven and Hell. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that is interesting because that is Michael Persinger's work. Persinger is really interesting because he's a scientist at Laurentian University in Canada, and he was looking at whether or not there are geomagnetic effects on intention. First of all, what we understand is that the Earth is buffeted by a geomagnetic shield, a geomagnetic ring that rings the Earth, almost like a donut, and the sun is kind of a furious and vengeful star, and it sends these things toward Earth. It starts sending and flinging all kinds of things toward Earth, like gaseous explosions, like coronal mass ejections and solar flares, and all these things happen. And space weather, what we consider space weather, is not a vacuum, but is this highly turbulent atmosphere of all of this activity. And all the time that the sun is hurling this stuff toward Earth, it's affecting the geomagnetic shield, and that increased geomagnetic activity affects us. So when we are, it particularly affects the human heart and brain, and it affects all living things too. I mean, homing pigeons can't find their way home, for instance, when there's a lot of geomagnetic activity.
Yeah.
But it shows that there's a lot of effect on our heart and brain, so that our psychiatric admissions increase. We have more heart attacks when this happens. All kinds of things. We have more epileptic fits. All kinds of things like that happen. But also, when it's a little active like this, it seems to enhance intention. It enhances mind over matter experiments. It's very good when there is no such activity for things like psychic ability. When the Earth is calm or geomagnetic activity is calm and not much is happening, that seems to help us to tune in and get more telepathic information. But when it's a little noisy, that seems to help us with intention. So Persinger found this because Persinger has he's kind of recreated what happens with geomagnetic activity. He's created this Chamber of Heaven and Hell, which is in the basement. It's a laboratory. He's created a motorcycle helmet that courses magnetic fields through the brain, low-level magnetic fields, just like it happens in geomagnetic activity. And he finds if he aims them at the temporal lobes of the brain, he can create the sense of God, the sense of the divine.
Interesting.
He calls it the Chamber of Heaven and Hell because not everybody got the sense of the divine. Some people have a sense of some satanic creature with, big eyes and the smell of burning sulfur.
Sure.
So some people have a really hellish experience too.
Yeah, and that seems to be kind of, it all depends on you very much and where you're at, because this is, as you say, this is not a energy that has, good or bad intention, I guess. It's just there, and it becomes of what you make of it. Do you agree on that?
Yes. I mean, it seems that people who have had bad early life experiences have a more sensitive right temporal lobe, and people who have had good life experiences are more sensitive left temporal lobe. And if you have more of a sensitive right one, you tend to get negative experiences with this. If you have more sensitive left, you have happier ones.
Interesting. And there seems to be a big connection between consciousness and the magnetic field itself. I know at the beginning of your new book, The Intention Experiment, you mentioned this regarding going down to the absolute freezing point, basically, and looking at the structure of atoms, basically, and see how they rearrange. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'm not sure. I don't understand the question. Could you explain that again?
At the beginning of your book, you talk about the experiment where I can't remember his name now, but he actually lowers the temperature.
Oh, Thomas Rosenbaum.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he lowers temperature to a few degrees before absolute zero, so that he can take a substance and have its atomic activity slow down so much that they can look at what's happening. And I think his material is very interesting because he takes these real freakish substances that he helps to create called spin glasses, which are kind of anarchic material whose atoms are magnetic, but they point any which way. And then he lowers the temperature so they're just a few degrees above absolute zero, so he can monitor what's going on. Because normally at normal temperatures, atoms move around too fast for our equipment to measure. And then he starts applying an outside force, like magnetic field or heat, a temperature, to see what happens. And he found that what was shocking was they found that as they were applying a magnetic field, the atoms in this material started ignoring that magnetic field and operating according to their own rhythm, operating to their own laws. And they were kind of a law unto themselves. And so it made him realize that they were actually displaying non-local effects, that kind of instantaneous connection we were talking about earlier, and that these seem to override any outside force. So the significance of his findings, for our purposes, is that big things like atoms, as were occurring in this, are non-locally connected in the universe. And so non-locality seems to occur in the world at large. And so that was what was amazing. It was a real find, this information, and really overturned many, many assumptions about the nature of reality.
And this was also a way to, I guess, confirm or check if consciousness or thought or intention has a effect on material that on other instances move so fast that you can't actually measure them, right?
Exactly.
Very interesting. What I come to think about also is the consciousness studies done at the Monroe Institute. Is that anything you're aware of?
Yes, the studies with hemisync, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that is similar to what the chamber of heaven and hell, so to speak? Is there similarities there?
In a way, I think that they are looking at how you can create something to. First of all, I think the hemisync studies look at the fact that your brain waves can easily go in, using certain sounds, you can easily go into a meditative state. And they use a thing called a binaural beat, which is a beat that's slightly off on one side of the brain and the other, one side of the hearing and the other. And that causes the brain to kind of trip into a place of quick meditation. So it's a very clever way of moving you into a meditative state. I think some of their other studies are looking at this kind of a resonance effect between people, that you can send and receive information in certain states like this one.
Interesting. You also I wanted to kind of